I am a musicologist, so I'm a researcher, kind of with a background in music sociology and audience research. I'm also a project manager and curator in the area of contemporary music. And today I'll be giving, kind of introducing my postdoctoral project and offering some of the first insights from it. So a collaborative research project between artists and researchers in Potsdam. I'll be outlining what I think are some of the conditions for effective transdisciplinary collaborations in sustainability. And I'll be offering a few principles for creating, oh no, we've lost the slides. And they're back. Okay, or moving towards a just and ecological future for contemporary music. First of all, some background on the IASS, the institute that I'm currently a research associate at. This is the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. I'm just going to carry on talking. Yep. And it's a publicly funded research institution that has a kind of transdisciplinary focus and produces a lot of co-creative research in which it works very closely with partners from politics, from civil society, and also from the private sector. And also has quite a strong function in building networks in between those different worlds. This is, got a little light show going on here now. I'm just going to carry on. And what's quite interesting is that there's actually quite a strong mixture of researchers from the social sciences and from the natural sciences. So there are a lot of different disciplines coming together and trying to bring different interest groups together along or around the topic of sustainability. And some recent focal topics at the ISS have included energy transitions and, in particular, the future of coal mining regions in Brandenburg. But there are also some connections to the arts at the ISS, and specifically the Art Science Corporations for Sustainability group that I'm a part of, and that's been running since 2021. And our kind of core question is, what happens when artistic and scientific perceptions or understandings of sustainability collide? Or like, what kind of different understandings of problems and issues are there? And how can you kind of translate in between these different approaches? And we initiate cooperations between artists and scientists, quite recently also in a kind of tandem format between natural scientists and artists, for example. And we also conduct research on these, or evaluations of these very collaborations, and kind of look at the conditions that make them successful, or that contribute something, or look at what didn't go so well. And another kind of important intersection between the arts and the IASS's activities is the Fellow Program, which I thought might be of interest to some of you. This is essentially like about 30 to 40 fellows each year at the ISS, and this is kind of a year of affiliation that you can have with the Institute. There are opportunities to develop research ideas and to collaborate with scientists or with a range of different actors at the Institute. And living expenses can be covered in that time. And each year, of those fellows, at least 2 are generally artists. Sometimes there are also specific calls for applications from artists. So there's more information on the website about that, on the ISS website. So the project I'm working on currently has the rather clunky title of A Sustainable Cultural Mission for Music, a New Aspect of Orchestral Excellence. And this is a cooperation between the ISS, or the ASCS group, and the Kammerakademie Potsdam. The Kammerakademie Potsdam, some of you may be aware of them, they're a chamber orchestra specialized in classical music, in particular Baroque and early classical music, though they do extend to some contemporary repertoire. And they were founded in 2001, and it's kind of a merging of 2 existing ensembles. And they have institutional funding from the city in Potsdam, but they employ or don't employ their musicians on a freelance basis. So that's also kind of brings out some interesting frictions that I'll get into in a bit. And this project is funded until mid next year. It's been going for already about a year, but probably will be extended till the end of next year. What did I want to say? Okay, no. And the core aims of the project, or the main aim overall, is to establish social-ecological sustainability as a marker of quality alongside artistic quality in the activities of the orchestra of the Kammerakademie. And kind of some aims that are contributing to that aim, we're developing a sustainability strategy for the orchestra collaboratively. We're developing new artistic formats and opportunities for dialogue with the local community in Potsdam. And there's also the aim of improving, modernizing, rethinking internal processes and decision-making processes within the orchestra. By sustainability in this project, we mean social-ecological sustainability. So a kind of interrelation of ecological, economic, and social aims. And we're kind of guided in this, or grounded in this, by the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. So the 17 goals that we're all supposed to reach by 2030, which we probably won't reach, which are also kind of pictured here. And we view them as, in this model, as a kind of like tripartite structure, but one that really intersects and interrelates. So you can't have healthy, just society without respecting planetary boundaries. And you can't have either of those other things if you don't rethink how you distribute wealth or various other economic matters. So tripartite but interconnected and interdependent, that's kind of our way of thinking about things here. And a further kind of key aim in this understanding of sustainability, or the kind of definition that we want to change or debate through this project, is looking at the relationship between sustainability and current markers of excellence or quality in classical music. And these are kind of debates that we've already been having today. But our current markers of excellence are just too often tied to unsustainable standards, as we all know. So traveling, appearing abroad, doing a guest appearance in another country, or having a kind of international reputation, this is so often seen to be a marker for an excellent orchestra or an excellent artist, especially also when it comes to conductors and composers, conductors and soloists. That is just a big part of what classical music, or how classical music considers itself and ranks different ensembles. And we want to ask, what about the local in that? How can that receive, also be part of an excellent orchestra's profile? We want to question ideas of, or wonder, or questions that we kind of did in the round earlier on. What does it mean to grow in the arts? What kind of degrowth do we need? What would that mean? I think we're all clear on that. We need to slow down artistic production to allow for sustainable ways of producing. So taking the time it needs to find new suppliers for materials, or traveling more slowly. But we also need that for musicians' health, and for artists' health, and for the health of people doing all kinds of cultural work. So that's just kind of another way in which all of these goals are so interdependent. So we want to kind of, in this project, want to imagine and discuss and initiate debate about imagining an orchestral scene, a classical music scene, in which an orchestra, an ensemble, or other institution is not just excellent because of the music it makes or who it invites, but also due to its production processes, its working conditions, how it connects to local communities and audiences. This understanding of sustainability was published recently in the CAP, so the Kammerakademie's season brochure. It will finally be available online very soon. So some of the first steps in the project last year were to set up a working committee, a mixture of orchestra members, so musicians and staff from the orchestra, around the topic of sustainability. We would develop this definition in a series of workshops. And I conducted a literature review on the sustainability discourse in classical music, and kind of through this, found the following things. There is a real lack of standards and transparency in reporting. So it's now quite often the case that orchestras have some kind of sustainability statement, policy, set of actions that they're thinking of implementing, but it's very hard to see often how far, what progress they've made in this, what kind of standards they might be using. They may have adopted standards from corporate responsibility that aren't actually made to fit or don't fit so well when you're talking about small cultural organizations. Maybe we need to develop our own standards. That's kind of what I found on that, first of all. There are a lot of social ecological visions, but then often only just a kind of few ecological actions. There's not very much interrelated. How can we kind of slow down and improve this and this? No, we might just switch our paper supplier and not change anything else. Is a little bit what's happening. And there is an idea that we need to broaden an idea of excellence, or this kind of idea of excellence connected to a kind of international reputation, producing a lot of concerts, that needs to change. But we haven't got to the stage yet when that's really being thought about in any fundamental way. And there's no real questioning of norms taking place. There are a couple of orchestras now that have said, we're not flying anybody in anymore. But you kind of hear other orchestras being like, well, I don't wonder how long they'll last. There's a lot of kind of competition about this that needs to kind of drop, or kind of, I don't know, we all need to decide how we're going to get to that next step in standards. And I think competition in some ways can be kind of healthy, but also actually just causes people to make fun of other people's progress. Anyway, I'm going to carry on and hope that this stays as it is. What we're actually doing in the project is kind of split into three main topic areas. The first one I'm not going to say so much about right now, covers working conditions, campaigning for sustainable funding, equal opportunities. For this, I conducted an internal survey at the orchestra on working conditions, what people think of like current decision-making processes, also like communication. What is the CAP like as a Arbeitsplatz, as a place of work? And there have been some quite difficult conversations that have come out of that. Actually presented a lot of that back actually last week. So that's the kind of process that's being set forward. One really good thing that did already kind of come out of that process was that the musicians are now being compensated for their participation in kind of things like the working committee. There are several kind of AGs connected to the orchestra. They weren't previously being compensated for that work, but that's now something that's already been implemented. Kind of the second main area covers cultural participation, building relationships to audiences, and further developing the orchestra's regional identity in Potsdam and in Brandenburg. And the third area covers sustainable production and artistic or musical responses to the climate emergency. And in the second topic area, I'm conducting, in my kind of research associate role, a study on the social sustainability of this orchestra. I'm looking at the associations with the orchestra in Potsdam. I want to kind of assess the impact of the cultural outreach projects that they've been doing in Drewitz, which is a kind of like part of like southern Potsdam, which is kind of socio-economically deprived, you could say. They're also very much changing. But they've been involved in projects there with a particular primary school and a community centre for about 10 years. But I'm looking to see whether there's been any transfer between those projects and their core audience, or how are those kinds of projects actually received in that community, and what has been the impact of it over that time. And I want to look at the kind of role of this orchestra in city life. And within that, as a kind of, from a music sociology perspective, I'm interested in seeing and looking at how classical music could be, or is not maybe, a common good, or like part of public life, and what could be the potential for it to be that maybe. I'm collecting data at concerts from audiences through a survey, and I'm conducting 2 focus groups one of which will be with people from the Drewitz community. This will hopefully come together into a research article at the end of next year. And for the CAP itself, for the orchestra, will offer a basis for reflection, definition of future priorities, and hopefully also kind of feed into other areas in the project. So what basis, given that we then have taken stock of this orchestra's role in the city, what role could it play in lobbying for better climate protection or climate adaptation in Potsdam, for example? What kind of resonance does it have with the public in order to connect to other issues? And as part of this area, there's actually also been a new school cooperation initiated in Babelsberg, and they're producing a series of short concert programs connecting music and sustainability. So in topic area 3, looking at sustainable production, we're looking at doing a common good audit, a Gemeinwohlbilanz, and this is kind of a social-ecological audit, so a slightly larger endeavor than a kind of CO2 balance or just like a climate balance or audit. And yeah, this is very much, we're at the very early stages in this process, and once again, a Gemeinwohlbilanz is something that's mostly been done by businesses. There are some universities that have done it, and there's also some local authorities. So we're looking to see can we apply this in the cultural sector. There are a few organizations that have done it before, which we're getting in touch with and finding out whether this is going to be appropriate. But essentially, you review your organization along a number of different intersecting themes, working conditions, sustainable production, uses of materials, also kind of like Lieferketten, the ways in which you acquire materials, also sustainable further down the line, and you have to collect a lot of data about your organization and what it does. So we're kind of still working on that, and we're hoping that will also be a good internal process, not just something that is done. Someone comes maybe comes externally and does this for us, or does this, we provide some data and we do it with the Gemeinwohlbilanz organization. We really want this to make a larger impact within the orchestra and get as many people involved in it as possible. But that's still very much a work in progress. We're looking to reinstate a lapsed cooperation with the local transport authority in Potsdam, the VIP, to include a public transport ticket with concert tickets. And one thing that we should be getting going within the next couple of months is offering the orchestra's concerts, or just any of the concerts that they've already programmed for this season, as platforms for local initiatives on climate-related or social-related issues, that they can kind of introduce themselves and maybe collect donations in the interval, or collect signatures. So kind of using the concert hall as a platform to network and to connect to the community. And at the end of next year, in the summer next year, we're hoping to have a mini festival and symposium around the topics of sustainability and music, and also present some new artistic programs and the results from that other school project that's just been started. So after a kind of year of working in this collaborative manner as a kind of researcher with an orchestra, I'd like to offer just a few of what I think are some of the challenges and opportunities of working like this. Certainly, roles need to be very clear, and it also needs to be made clear that the project and process needs dedicated time. Even when you have funding for something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you make time for it. And it took a while for us to get something like the working committee going and meeting regularly in amongst putting on, this orchestra puts on a couple of concerts each week, or no, not as many as that, but very regularly, and they already have enough to do. So it's once again, how do you make time to think about things that might actually save you time in future, might make you able to produce more sustainably. There are a lot of internal conflicts around that had to be kind of gotten through. Sustainable action requires people to rethink their privileges, and this can be very challenging. And we're having quite a few, around this topic of excellence, and how are we going to rethink what this orchestra kind of stands for and place sustainability alongside artistic quality. That leads to some very, very difficult conversations that you kind of have to be prepared for emotionally. With people saying things like, yeah, I don't think I don't see at all how we can reduce our travel. We're a small orchestra. We need to build our profile still, and maybe a concert should also just be a concert. Are you sure we should invite people? Is this the right way? I mean, a lot of kind of things and different viewpoints, and and also people who kind of just feel a bit guilty or feel a bit attacked, and that's also a totally normal emotional response, but that also needs to be kind of made time for. I think it's really important to establish an authentic connection to this topic. There's a lot of it, I think, particularly in classical music, where there's such a strong hierarchy of different orchestras and kind of where you are. I think there literally is a hierarchy in Germany of like A, B, C, which orchestras are in the top ranks and which ones aren't. And there's a lot of kind of like, we might do this because they're doing it, or we won't bother because the Berliner Philharmoniker won't do it. And I think there's often a sense of, getting into something, and because we need to have a sustainability project, surely. But then once you have started that project, think about what is actually your personal, authentic connection to that. I think it's fine to take an impulse from externally and say, we need to do this right now because X, Y, Z is also doing it. Fine to get you started. But why are you doing this? What are the intentions? What do you want to see come out of it? And I think it's also quite easy for us all to probably develop a personal connection to this topic. So take time to do that. And I've also kind of come across quite a few vague and slightly romanticized notions about the power of music, or the power of art, and in particular the power of classical music, that I feel like kind of need to be worked through a bit more. Classical music in itself can also reproduce social inequality. It can be used as a social marker in a kind of negative way. It's not necessarily a force for good. It's certainly not neutral. And I think that's how a lot of people see it. So how do we kind of move away from those more romanticized views and actually think about what can something like an orchestra do actively, and be realistic about that? Kind of under that point as well, intergenerational dialogue is not something you necessarily associate with classical music, but something that's very important when you talk about sustainability. And I think there's more awareness of this coming through at the orchestra about how to connect with people who actually primarily listen to other types of music. And what will that kind of take, and what kind of values do you actually also need to change and adapt to reach people? And all of that being realistic and reflective about what art, what music can do, what kind of musics do we mean in all of that, and how are they possibly seen by people from outside. This is my last slide. How can we bring about an ecological and just future for contemporary music? At the basis of everything is obviously money, funding, that allows for deceleration and for reflected sustainable production. We need to lobby in an organized way. I don't really like the word lobby, but it's kind of the most useful word here. In an organized way for funding structures that enable change. And I put an example here, which actually also mentioned in one of the rounds earlier on. The ISS, the group leader from the research group that I'm involved with, actually got quite far with an idea for a Fonds für Ästhetik und Nachhaltigkeit that would offer 6-year scholarships to artists and allow them to, and also give them opportunities to collaborate with scientists in that time. And this was actually taken up by the Green Party in their party program for the elections last year, but then was not taken up into the coalition's manifesto and party program when that was all sorted out post-election. So that was kind of a bit of a sad story, but at least it did get as far as that, and I find that in itself actually quite hopeful, that there are models out there that are interesting to politicians that maybe one day we'll be able to change that. We need to think about resource sharing and reducing competition maybe a little bit of competition kind of gets people going a bit occasionally, as I was saying, in the orchestral scene. But overall, no, we need to think about how we can resource share in a productive way, and how institutions can really actually support the independent scene most productively. And we kind of think those kind of power structures that develop around that often. Working conditions, freelancer health, diversity, equal opportunities, connecting to local communities, these are important markers of quality in music, and these need to be up there next to artistic quality, I think. So not necessarily more important, but next to, if we want to change things. And just this final point, I think we actually stand to learn a lot about music's role in contemporary society through all of these kinds of changes and reimaginings. And I think that's very exciting, to reconsider music's relationship to social movements, larger change. That's what I would also like to see. Thank you.